So the inspiration for this paper actually emerged from my teaching at the University of Leeds. I was updating a reading list for our postgraduate international relations theory module and looking for a critique of critical theory. And that led me to David A. Schmid's excellent article and later book, The Poverty of Critical Theory. In these works, Schmid identified what he called a crisis of critique in post-Habermasian critical theory. And he was not the only one, of course. Beate Jahn used similar language in her review of the state of critical IR theory in an earlier piece. Jahn's point was that critical theory may have established itself in international relations as an academic discipline and might even be considered mainstream in that discipline, but the world outside the discipline had taken a very different direction. And the implication here, of course, is that critical theory is disengaged. Schmid made a similar point when he accused post-Habermasian critical theory of, for example, Andrew Linklater, of leaving us with a form of consolatory cosmopolitanism. We might take consolation from the fact that we have standards of appropriate behavior, norms, but that's not good enough if in practice those norms are increasingly being violated. Now, this critique of critical theory certainly hit the mark, for me at least, when it was set against the continuing rise of the populist New Right and its ongoing transgressions of liberal norms, as well, of course, against the backdrop of the charge of genocide in Gaza. My problem then is not with the critique of critical theory, it is with the response to that critique. So, for instance, Jahn and Schmid are among a number of other authors working in the area of critical theory who argue that the future of critical theory lies in recovering the tradition of negative critique that was prominent in the pre-Habermasian or first generation Frankfurt School work of Horkheimer and Adorno. And I express two concerns with this signposting of the future of critical theory. Firstly, it seems to me these proposals underplay the reasons why first generation theorizing actually failed. And secondly, if we take this path, critical IR risks rejecting the second generation work of Habermas and Linklater at the very moment it has particular value. It has value now because the pressing nature of shared challenges like climate change demand collective action, and that requires a theory of how consensus is legitimately constructed, defended, and or changed. Now, I also do two things in response to these concerns. Firstly, I too look back to pre-Habermasian critical theory, but I draw instead on the American philosophical pragmatism of John Dewey. This, I think, can help critical IR theory to realize the emancipatory potential that is there in IR's practice turn, which also helps to address the concern that critical theory itself is disengaged. Furthermore, Dewey's pragmatism brings, I think, a balanced approach to negative and positive critique. And that challenges what I see as an unhelpful binary between critical and problem-solving theory, which of course has been at the center of critical IR for so many years. And I think this theoretical challenge speaks more constructively to real-world challenges like climate change. Now, this look back to Dewey, who was of course a contemporary and New York neighbor of first-generation Frankfurt School theorists, it begs the question of why critical theory actually rejected American pragmatism. And I tell that story in the article. However, my second response to the critique of critical theory, I look forward from Habermasian-inspired theory to third generation and pragmatist inspired recognition theory of Axel Honneth. I think this is particularly important because it brings a critical edge to ontological security studies in international relations. And it can further develop the praxeological branch of critical IR, and importantly, I think it can inform the political left's response to the alienating effects of the liberal international order and the rise of the populist right. So I hope you find the article helpful, and I'd be delighted if you want to continue the debate by emailing me. Thanks for watching.